horseshoe is back.
What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of the Bring the Juice Colts podcast. We're going to be previewing the Colts matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens for Monday Night Football, Colts' first primetime game of the year. Certainly not the first primetime game for this team that we're about to face, and I got Mr. Ravens Fan Reacts on here. Anyone that's a Ravens fan has to know who this guy is. How are you doing, man?
What's going on, man? Thank you for having me, Derek. It's great to be here on the Bring the Juice pod for sure. And like I was telling my guy Derek, man, I had to troll you guys a little bit with the little bit of the Baltimore Colts logo in the background. Now, look, I'm not old enough to remember when the Baltimore Colts were a thing. I just only did this just to troll you guys.
That was the funny thing, too, because I saw it on Twitter. I've seen a few people tell me, like, I wonder how many Baltimore fans are actually still salty that Indianapolis now has the Colts.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not old enough to remember either, but, yeah I was wondering that same thing.
Yeah, it doesn't affect me in any way. I just, I wanted to do it just
Of course,
Yeah.
we love the trolls. We get it all the time, so nothing different here. All right, so, well, your Ravens are certainly off to a good start of the season, 3-1. You guys have played some pretty decent teams. You guys beat the Chiefs, handed them their first loss ever in the month of September with Patrick Mahomes as the starting quarterback.
Yep.
You guys did play the Raiders. That was your only loss. And obviously the Raiders 3-1 looking pretty good right now. You did play the then number one defense in Denver last week and won that one. How have you felt so far about your record and where you guys stand?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting season because I'm sure you guys have seen that the Ravens had so many injuries to start off the season. We lost both our starting running backs, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, right before week one. And we also lost Marcus Peters, which was a huge loss in the secondary there. And we just kept dealing with injury after injury. And it was like, man, the season hasn't even started and we're losing our entire team, So, yeah, so that Raiders game, it was a little weird, but I kind of chalk it up to just we're trying to figure out who our playmakers are and all that, and with all these injuries going on. And it seems like we've started to find our footing there, as you guys saw in week 2 when we did beat the Chiefs. That was awesome. It was an amazing win. First time Lamar Jackson has beaten Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, so you love to see that. And then we followed it up with kind of a little bit of a letdown game, I guess you could say, against the Lions. Although, we can talk about it a little bit more.
Half your team was either injured or on the COVID list, so I kind of figured that would happen.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, pretty much our entire defensive line was out there with COVID. So, we were missing a lot of players against the Lions, and I didn't expect to win that game. The fact that Justin Tucker came in and made that 66-yard field goal was just, divine, was crazy. And then, we followed up with a kind of a blowout against the Denver Broncos in Denver. So, that's where we're at right now, feeling pretty good. I think that this team is starting to, really get going here. And it's been a good way that we've been, going. But we still do have a lot of injuries. So it's something to be a little bit concerned about for sure.
Yeah, and I'll say right off the top, I am truly saddened for you Ravens fans for all the injuries that you guys had to sustain. I'm a big fan of J.K. Dobbins because I'm a Buckeye. I love J.K. Dobbins and what he was going to potentially bring this year. Obviously losing Gus Edwards as well, a big blow to the running back room. And then Marcus Peters the next play. That was rough, man. The Colts fans feel for you guys because, we've had our fair share of injuries that we've had to deal with this year as well. But ironically enough, the Colts right now at this moment in time are actually the healthiest they have been since the start of training camp. Carson Wentz is almost 100% back with the foot injuries he's been dealing with. Our secondary guys are kind of coming back, and we might get our right tackle back for this game. Might. I can't say I'm sure, but he might. Basically, the majority of the guys that are on the practice report injury list now are most likely going to play in this game. So we're back to being mostly healthy outside of, losing Quentin Nelson. But
Right. That's what I was going to ask you about, because that's a big one for you.
Yep. Lost him to IR last week.
Mm-hmm.
He won't be back until another 2 weeks. But we do have Chris Reed at backup left guard, and he was a full-time starter for the Panthers last year, only gave up 1 sack. He's been very good so far to start out. I mean, why don't you break down the injury report for you guys? Because I've seen quite a few did not participants on this list today.
Yeah, so I was looking at it a little bit earlier. I'm gonna go ahead and bring it up here just to double check. One thing that I do remember is that our safety Deshaun Elliott actually did start practicing again. I believe he missed this last game against the Broncos, and we put third-round rookie Brandon Stevens in his place. And so having Deshaun Elliott back will be a huge help for the secondary. So what I'm seeing is that we didn't have Jimmy Smith practicing. We didn't have Justin Houston, a guy you guys are very familiar with. Alejandro Villanueva, also dealing with a little bit of a knee thing. Ronnie Stanley, not expected to play, as we know, for a while. And Geno Stone also didn't practice. So for me, I mean, I believe for Justin Houston, I think he's fine. I think it's just a vet day off. We usually give the older guys days off, from practice. And it might be the same thing with Jimmy Smith. I imagine he's kind of, throughout his career, he's been injury prone, so it could just be a little bit of a cautious thing, just trying to let him rest a little bit. As far as I know, I think Alejandro Villanueva should play. As I understand, his knee injury is not too serious. It's just like a little bit of soreness, I guess. But at the same time, if you're a Ravens fan, you know how John Harbaugh can be with injuries. He'll be like, nah, it's not that big of a deal, and then it turns out they're done for the season, So you never really know.
The Colts fans know that one. We have said that several times when Frank Reich has told us, oh, we're optimistic these guys are coming back sooner. I mean, he said that about Quentin Nelson. He said that about Carson. He was right there. Yeah. But he said that about Braden Smith, and Braden Smith had been out for now maybe 4 weeks. So, I mean, we totally get you there.
Yeah, so so I'm hoping that Villanueva will play because he was terrible when he was playing right tackle, but ever since we moved him over to the left side back at his natural position, he has been a little bit better there. So hopefully he's there because if not, we're gonna have Andre Smith, who's an old player, was drafted in the first round like 10 years ago, I want to say, something like that, something crazy. So hopefully Villanueva's fine, he plays, but aside from that, Ronnie Stanley's not going to be back for this game, and Geno Stone, I'm not sure. He's not really a huge contributor. He's probably not a name that people are familiar with, but yeah, I mean, we're fairly healthy, I guess, compared to how we usually have been, so that's always a good sign. But yeah, so I expect most of these guys that didn't practice to play, to be honest with you.
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah, I mean, Colts are kind of in the same way, just a couple players that we're just unsure of at this moment in time, but we'll find out a little further down the line. Obviously, both teams had an extra day of rest, so maybe we'll see if that helps. But obviously, let's just talk about, what's the most common theme here. What Colts fans always ask, what any team asks about the Baltimore Ravens, and that's the fearsome reputation that you guys have on that offense. Obviously, Lamar Jackson, just a beast. I mean, everybody knows what he can do. You guys have a couple different weapons. Despite losing some running backs, you do have Mark Andrews, who's quickly ascended as one of the better receiving tight ends in the NFL. Hollywood Brown, no short of making spectacular plays with his speed on the outside. So far this season, how do you feel your offense has looked, and do they live up to that reputation still?
So it's interesting because usually when you think of the Baltimore Ravens, you think, oh, the running game, right? But this season, it's actually been our passing game that has been heating up, believe it or not. Lamar has been pretty damn on point, like with a lot of his passes, especially going deep. You might be surprised to find out that Lamar has been hitting his receivers deep. Now, sometimes, like especially in the Lions game, his receivers let him down. Marquise Brown, as I called him at the time, whenever he has a drop game, I demote him back to Marquise Brown. I don't call him Hollywood Brown.
Okay.
He has earned the nickname of Hollywood Brown again after his performance in Denver.
Okay.
But after Detroit, I was calling him Marquise. But anyway, so yeah, Lamar has shown that he's able to hit these deep passes, and the passing game has been heating up a lot. Sammy Watkins, he's actually been he hasn't had like a lot of I don't even know if he has a touchdown on the season, to be honest with you. But he moves the chains, and he gets us he converted that huge 4th and 19 play against the Detroit Lions when we needed it. So Sammy Watkins has been that reliable receiver for us to move the chains when we need him. And on top of that, we might get our first-round rookie, Rashad Bateman. He might be making his debut in this game. Now, it's not for sure. I don't have any news that it's going to be for sure, but from what I understand, he may be making his debut, so that would be awesome to see. We're also going to be getting maybe Miles Boykin back, who is not a household name at receiver, but he is a very huge contributor in the blocking game, so
okay.
that could definitely help us run the ball a little bit better there. But yeah, so it will be interesting to see if we do get Rashad Bateman back, because the way that Lamar has been throwing the ball, this passing game could definitely heat up a lot against these Colts. Now, the running game is interesting right now. It's I think the best game we had was actually against the Chiefs, because the Chiefs just cannot stop the run.
Yeah, their defense has been atrocious this year.
Yeah, it's been terrible. They're just incapable of stopping anything, really. So that was our best rushing attack against the Chiefs. But aside from that, it hasn't been like what you're used to. Like, you're used to seeing the Ravens putting up at the minimum 150 yards on the ground. Sometimes even 200, 250. But lately it's been like you saw against the Broncos, we struggled to get to 100 yards until the very last play of the game, literally. So it's a mixture of things. I think it's the offensive line, it's a lot of injuries there. It's also the running backs. Like, we're not really sure who we want to be, like the workhorse guy. We have Latavius Murray, we have Devontae Freeman, we have Le'Veon Bell. It feels like you just get a bunch of names. And
that's the thing. You guys got
yeah.
some big names on that roster. I mean,
right.
Obviously it hasn't quite gotten to the point where you want it yet, but
yeah.
You got some older veteran running backs who have been around for a while and know how it works. I mean, yeah, I found that funny to see Devontae Freeman, Latavius Murray, and Le'Veon Bell all on the same roster. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's like a fantasy team from 2017
yes.
or something, right? So, yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, none of them have. Latavius Murray has kind of been the workhorse right now. He's the one that seems to be getting most of the carries. I think that they're hoping Le'Veon Bell can really get going. Although last week he didn't really do much. So. And Devontae Freeman, honestly, I think he's cooked. He's just not really that good.
Yeah, I don't expect much out of Bell or Freeman anymore at this point. I think Murray is pretty much supposed to be the main back. I mean, he's not a big play guy, but he definitely is a workhorse.
Oh yeah. So yeah, for the running game, it's not as potent as as you're used to for this Ravens offense for sure, But just the threat of it, I think, is enough to allow Lamar to get some open passing lanes, which is what makes it so dangerous.
Yeah. So, when you talk about Lamar, the completion percentage this year has been a little concerning. You mentioned in the Lions game, a bunch of receivers, letting him down. I felt like, in a way, I know how this is because Carson's completion percentage was dropped a lot because of the week 3 game where his ankles were really bad. He had no mobility. He was on edge the whole time. So he wasn't in the game really, even though he was. So therefore his completion percentage just took a huge hit, even though I know the other 3 games, he's been throwing damn near 70% completion percentage. So
yeah.
I mean, obviously, 1 game in 4 games can really skew a stat like that. But, Lamar only has 4 passing touchdowns to 3 interceptions and has fumbled the ball quite often this year and has been sacked 11 times. So
Yeah.
does that concern you at all right now? I mean, obviously you've faced one good defense in the Broncos, but we could argue the other defenses that your team has faced has not really been up to snuff. And yet this is still becoming an issue where Lamar is getting sacked and losing the football quite often.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm actually surprised. I didn't know that he's been sacked 11 times. I knew it was a lot, but I didn't know it was that much already. Yeah, so like I said, this offensive line dealing with injuries. We're kind of shuffling things around. We still haven't figured out the left guard position. We're putting in Ben Powers on some plays. We're putting in Ben Cleveland on. We have three Bens. I don't actually. Do we still have the other Ben? I don't know. Well, we had three guards named Ben on the roster, and it was just a battle there at the left guard position to see which Ben took the spot. But yeah, so that's kind of what's going on. Is the offensive line is definitely not up to par, and Lamar, he gets pressured a lot, and like the Raiders game was just terrible. Lamar had no time to throw like at all. So it's been a little bit better now. But yeah, like you said, the fumbles. I think a lot of that did come against the Raiders, to be honest, because he had 2 fumbles in that game, and and the 4 touchdowns. Like, yeah, it's kind of weird that he only has 4 touchdowns because he has been slinging the thing, but
Yeah.
but there's a lot of touchdowns that have been left on the field, like I said, because whether it's Marquise Brown dropping touchdowns, Mark Andrews sometimes has issues with his hands. And last week we actually had a touchdown to Mark Andrews that was called back because of I think it was either a offensive face mask or a holding penalty. So it's those types of things that's going on. But I mean, when you're talking about Lamar just taking shots, he's been taking shots, and I think that might be one of the reasons why his completion percentage is a little bit lower, because he's not checking it down like at all. Like, he's looking to go deep, and that's what Lamar has been doing this season. So I would much rather take that than just check down King here and there, and So,
I call it check down Jerry. That's pretty much how it is.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that might be part of the reason for the completion percentage. But for me, it's not too concerning. I think completion percentage is a little bit overrated of a stat, because you could have like a 70% completion percentage and you're averaging like 4 or 5 yards per throw.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
So that's the way I see it, but I'm not too concerned about Lamar. There's a few passes that he is off on. He's either underthrowing or overthrowing sometimes, so that's still gonna happen. But he's definitely been a lot more on point this season. So
yeah, I mentioned that to one of my other Colts buddies who has a Colts channel on YouTube. I asked him, like, is anyone else concerned about how Lamar's been chucking the ball down the field the way he is, and a lot more accurately than what it normally is? And, he said no, which I'm surprised at that, because I'm kind of nervous about it, especially for what the Colts have done with, what they try to do now, and I think what they're going to implement is the fact that they're going to stay back because they do not want Hollywood Brown and others to make those big plays. They're going to force them to try and be doing the check downs to get those yards and eventually make Baltimore make a mistake. Now, granted, for Colts fans that don't know, despite all the turnovers that I just mentioned with the Baltimore Ravens, they're still only a -1 in the turnover ratio. So, despite all the fumbles and interceptions that have been caused from the Baltimore Ravens on their defense, they're also creating turnovers, which we'll get into here in a second. But who do you think has the biggest impact to make against this secondary? The Colts play a mostly zone coverage. They play some cover 2. They play Tampa 2. They play different cover 3, cover 1 options, things like that. Who do you think could take most advantage of? Is it Watkins? Is it Andrews, Brown? Who takes most advantage of that?
All right, so I'm going to tell you guys a name that you guys are probably not too familiar with, because yeah, what do you think of the passing game? You think of Hollywood Brown, you think of Mark Andrews, and you think of Sammy Watkins, right? Now, obviously, if Rashad Bateman comes in, that's going to be a whole nother factor that you guys got to look out for.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say James Prochet. He is another wide receiver that we have on the roster, not a huge household name, but he is obviously very well known in the Baltimore area and the Ravens fan base. He had a pretty good game against the Broncos. I think he had like 74 yards, 5 receptions, and the man has hands for days. He's not a big receiver. He's like 5'9". He's very short. He's not a speedy receiver, but the man has hands. Like, it's insane. Like, his hands are just crazy. So look out for James Prochet if you're focusing on Hollywood. Like, we've seen him just run behind safeties, how he's a speedster there.
Yeah.
And like I said, Watkins has been the third down guy, the move the chains guy, so that could be something else to look out for. And man, Mark Andrews is always going to be, he's always going to be Lamar's favorite target. That's just how it is. So if you guys are just focusing on that, you could see James Prochet. You could see another guy that's kind of underrated as well, Devin Duvernay. He had a touchdown against the Lions. He could get open there. So I actually, like, for the first time, I think in a long time, maybe ever, I actually, well, maybe not ever, but, back like in the Super Bowl year, but I really like this receiving core that the Ravens are working with, especially when you consider that we could have Rashad Bateman added to the mix. It's just, it's crazy. We've never, the last time, like I said, was when we won the Super Bowl, which is when I really liked my receiving core, but now I'm really liking this receiving core, so we actually have weapons. It's crazy to say. Like, you got to look out for these guys, for sure.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's shift a little bit. I'm just curious about your perspective because I like to ask, because everybody has a differing opinion on Carson Wentz. I even a lot of Colts fans, I can never get a lot of people to agree on one stance. There's still a good section of the Colts fan base who thinks he's been god-awful this year.
Sure.
There's a section of the Colts fan base like me who actually thinks he's been pretty good this year given the circumstances of the team that's been around him. There's been other people who think he's been a god so far this year. I'm not going to cater to them, but I'm curious to know your thoughts on it. I know you probably haven't watched a lot of Carson Wentz film, but how have you felt about Carson Wentz so far with Indianapolis?
So Carson Wentz is an interesting player for me because, you go back in his history, everybody's going to point to that year that he probably was going to win MVP, and he ended up getting injured there, and the Eagles ended up winning the Super Bowl, right, off of that run. Carson Wentz, like, when he was on the Eagles and we played him, he always gave us a fight, man. Like, I don't know what it was. Like, it felt like he had something against the Ravens. Like, he really wanted to beat us. Like, I don't know what it was. Maybe he was a lifelong Steelers fan and we don't know about it or something there. But yeah, man, like Carson, last year we played the Eagles and they weren't even that good. And somehow they were able to cut it down to like a 30-28 game when everything was said and done. And it came off of like 2 comeback touchdowns from Carson Wentz to bring it close to at the end there. Made me a little bit nervous, made me sweat a little bit. So I know Carson Wentz has that ability in him. I by no means do I believe he's a bad quarterback. And I actually like the signing from the Colts for Carson Wentz I think for obvious reasons. The Frank Reich connection, the offensive line, the young and up-and-coming receivers that you guys have there. So there was a lot of factors that I liked for Carson Wentz. Now I'm sure he's not like the sole reason that you guys have lost 3 games this season.
I think most of Colts Nation agrees that he is like one of the last reasons why the Colts. Right. He's one of the few reasons why the Colts have been in these games the way they have been.
Yeah, for sure, and that's just kind of what I saw. So, I think that Carson Wentz is a good enough quarterback, and I think a lot of Ravens fans especially are kind of just overlooking this game like, it's the Colts. They're 1-3. We're just, it's, and while I get it, like I understand, like you look at Vegas, you look at everywhere, and everybody's gonna say that the Ravens are gonna dominate this game, right? And I understand why people think that, but I'm just saying, like, let's not just go into this game and overlook it, man, because you gotta play every game that comes your way, and no NFL team is just gonna lay down. And
no,
especially the Colts. Look, you guys are trying to go on a run. You're still in your division, right? The Titans just lost to the Jets, for God's sake, so it's wide open right now.
And not to mention with the teams that we've had to face. With how unhealthy we've been and everything else, We played Seattle the first game, played the Rams. Everyone knows what the Rams are building right now. You play the Tennessee Titans. You play Miami, who's been the weakest opponent by far. And now you're having to face Baltimore, another big team. So,
tough schedule.
we've faced 5 teams now in the first 5 weeks who last year were all in contention or did make the playoffs. So, it's kind of crazy that, everybody wants to point the finger at how bad our record is when we know you've been facing some really good teams to start out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really could see the Colts still coming back and winning that division, to be honest with you. It's just, it's one of those things. So,
it is very possible. And we got a lot of teams, like after the Ravens, the Colts will play a division opponent, I believe 3 out of the next 6 weeks. So, like the next month after we play you guys, it's going to be very important for the division. If the Colts can win all those games, then they are very, very likely to remain relevant in the division and still get it. So
crunch time.
Yeah, crunch time,
sure.
Absolutely. Okay, so obviously you said with Carson Wentz you felt that you felt confident that he could at least make this a game. The Colts this season, I think the Colts have established an identity for themselves and the motto is basically run the damn ball. That's the phrase coined by Indianapolis. Well, the only problem is we haven't really lived up to the run the damn ball quota. Jonathan Taylor has, through 4 games, ran the ball less than 60 times. So, less than 15 carries per game on average. Only ran the ball 10 times against Tennessee, which was really weird because he was averaging 6 yards per carry in that game. And I still to this day do not understand why we didn't do that. And then finally in the Miami game, finally ran for over 100 yards against Miami, had a couple big runs there, scored a touchdown in that game as well. That was his first touchdown of the year, believe it or not. The offensive line, again, has had its issues. I think that plays a lot into it. But, I mean, how do you feel your defense stacks up against this rushing attack? Because we know the Colts, when they decide to run the football, they will.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's definitely going to be a formidable rushing attack with Jonathan Taylor, for sure. So I think that everybody saw the play last week where Javonte Williams just pretty much carried our entire defense, right? Yeah. So everybody saw that. But to be honest with you, that was like the only big run that we gave up that day. It just happened to be like a highlight reel play type of thing. So, I mean, one thing that I will say that has been a problem this season, and it got better as the Broncos game went on, and I'm hoping that we continue with that pattern there, is our tackling has been terrible this season. It's been really bad. And I think a lot of it is we have a lot of like speed, like our linebacking core is definitely more of a speedy linebacker. It's not like those thumper style linebackers that are going to come in and play the run game. We have Patrick Queen, who I love Patrick Queen, but he does have trouble with tackling a lot of the times, and it can be extremely frustrating. So if Jonathan Taylor starts working on Patrick Queen, that could be a big problem. And especially if he gets up into the secondary where we have the smaller guys, it could definitely be a big problem. So I think that where we really excel is keeping the running backs like not getting to that second level. And, because we have our defensive line, especially since they're going to be pretty healthy. We have Calais Campbell coming in. We have Justin Matabike, who is, I believe, a second-year player. He's really been balling out there on the defensive line. And what was a big issue for us, I think, a couple years ago was runs on the edge, outside runs. And that has not really been a problem at all for us this season. So we've done a really good job up front stopping the run there. But this is a very, very solid Colts offensive line that the defensive line has to go up against. Now, I know they're not at full strength, but still, they're very formidable. So, I think we should be okay. I think that the Colts' game plan should be to run the ball. You guys should try to kind of control the clock, because what you don't want is you don't want to have to get into forced passing situations where you're down on the scoreboard and you're forced to just pass the ball the whole time, right? because that's when we feast, because we're just going to send hella blitzes at you guys. So, that's
yeah.
all we're
And
gonna
I
do.
think that's the big thing is not getting ourselves into these third and longs, which the Colts seem to always get themselves in. They just need to start being more in those third and shorts. Makes it so much easier to go up against this Ravens defense when you're not having to throw the ball 10 yards every time.
Right, exactly. And especially because now we actually have a pretty decent pass rush, and that's something that we didn't really have last year, because we drafted Odafe Owe, which is a name, not too big of a name yet, but he is really showing out. He's been having some good games.
He was the one from Penn State, right?
Yes.
Okay, I remember him. One of the only few defensive ends out of the Big Ten from last year that ever got any love. And even though I think in his last season he never even recorded a sack, which is quite funny because why would you ever draft a guy that would never recorded a sack the previous year? But then again, it was a COVID year. A lot of things happened, so
No, well, a lot of Ravens fans had your exact same sentiment. So believe me, you're not alone in that thought process for sure. So
yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, I'll ask a little bit more about the secondary because, the Colts, their receivers have not been efficient by any stretch this year. But obviously, T.Y. Hilton not being in there, as much as people like to continue to say he's washed up, the Colts still continue to struggle without him on the field. He is, and I mean, the Ravens, apparently 10 minutes before Jim Irsay changed T.Y. Hilton's mind, was going to be a wide receiver for your team. So, I'm glad you didn't steal him from us because, he hasn't quite come back yet. Not going to be in this one either. Michael Pittman has 250 receiving yards on the season so far. He has been the leading receiver in yardage. Zach Pascal has been more of our red zone guy, has 3 touchdowns on the year. He actually had Carson's first 3. So, he's been one of the better ones at catching the ball in the red zone. And finally, the Colts figured out that they have this 6'6", 270-pound tight end named Mo Alley Cox, who has 10-inch hands and can catch a ball at 11 feet high. Somehow, some way, they forgot they had this as a weapon in the red zone, and they finally figured it out, and Carson just let it rip last week to him, and he had a 2-touchdown game. Probably had his best game of his pro career so far. Certainly hoping that they will continue to use him in the red zone because the Colts have been terrible in the red zone this year outside of last week. How do you feel the secondary matches up against these guys who, a lot of physical talent, not a lot of speed, but a lot of guys that can really go up and get the ball?
Yeah, so I think if you just look at pure numbers, I think that you see that, the tight ends have been destroying this Ravens secondary, right? Because you go back to week 1 against Darren Waller. Darren Waller had a monster game, just a crazy game against us. And then you follow it up with Travis Kelce, right? He had a freaking crazy game as well. Of
course.
Now, 2 of the best tight ends in the NFL, of course.
Yeah.
Maybe the top 2 tight ends. But then, interestingly enough, we ended up getting our guy Jimmy Smith back, who is our veteran corner, the oldest corner on the team. And we like to call him the tight end eraser because that's pretty much what he does. That's what he's been doing. And he did a really good job against TJ Hawkinson for the Lions. This past game against the Broncos, Noah Fant did have a touchdown, but it was actually our rookie Brandon Stevens' responsibility that he screwed up on. And so aside from the first 2 weeks, Darren Waller and Travis Kelce, we've been pretty good against tight ends. So now, obviously, Mo Alley Cox is a monster. He's, like you said, 270 pounds and 6'6". So that'll be an interesting matchup. Another player in the secondary that maybe not as big of a name that people know is Anthony Averett. And he's actually been playing extremely well. And he was actually someone that I didn't even have making the roster before the season started. But I'm so thankful that I was wrong on that because the man has been balling the hell out. So watch out for him, I think. And, of course, we also have Marlon Humphrey on the other side. He's definitely a little bit more known for his ability to punch the ball out. So the secondary, while we're dealing with injuries, it's still been super solid, and I think a lot of that is just the solid coaching that we always have back there. And if Deshaun Elliott does come back, that's going to be a huge boost to the secondary as well, because he's not necessarily like a pick artist. He's not going to come in and pick off the ball, but the man can hit hard, and the man, he erases the deep passing game quite a bit. So I still think that I'm still confident in the secondary. They've been pretty solid so far. Just the first two games, obviously against the Raiders and the Chiefs, two of the best offenses in the NFL, they did give the secondary some issues, but they've definitely gotten a lot better up here against these last two games against the Lions and the Broncos. So hoping that continues to be the case.
Yeah, I think the Colts are definitely like to use their tight ends in a lot of different ways. They definitely like to use double and oftentimes triple tight end sets in the run game, and hopefully they continue to do that for the pass game as well. I think having that many tight ends out there definitely creates a mismatch. Who on your defense needs to step up in order to slow down this Colts offense? Who is it?
Well, let's see. I'm going to say Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen, because like I said, he makes plays, he gets the ball quick, but it can kind of be sometimes too quick, if you will, because sometimes he'll miss a play or he'll miss a tackle. So I think we're definitely going to need Patrick Queen to step up big. Aside from that, we saw a little bit of a breakout game from Tyus Bowser. He's our other edge rusher aside from Odafe Owe. And of course, you're going to see Justin Houston every now and again. You're going to see Pernell McPhee, who's another veteran. We have a bunch of older players, as the Ravens tend to do. But yeah, my answer to your question would probably be Patrick Queen, because he's been missing tackles. He's been kind of getting in coverage. It hasn't been great. So I need Patrick Queen to really have one of those games to show us why we did draft him in the first round, and so that's just kind of, I'm going to say Patrick Queen there.
Well, obviously, I'll ask you one more question, and then we'll get into a score prediction here. So I don't even need to ask you about Justin Tucker. I know definitely the ability to hit a 60-yard field goal is now there. That's been confirmed. And obviously will go down as probably one of the greatest kickers we've ever seen. So I don't have to worry about that. But how about the rest of your special teams? Are they solid? Are they questionable? What's your feeling on it?
Yeah, so the thing with the Ravens special teams is that, you have John Harbaugh, right? And John Harbaugh, former special teams coach for Andy Reid. So pretty much ever since John Harbaugh has been here in Baltimore, the special teams has been super solid. Like, you rarely see mistakes. If you see a mistake, like if you see a muffed putt or a muffed return, the guy that muffed it is just cut the very next week. So that's how serious we are in special teams. We take it very seriously. So for the most part, I really have no concerns. You're going to see probably Devin Duvernay back there returning kicks and returning punts. And he's been pretty solid. So that's what I would say. I have really no concerns about this special teams unit at all.
Okay. All right. That's good. I just asked because, the Colts know for sure that special teams can end up costing you or winning you a game.
Absolutely.
Based on how that goes. So, all right.
3 phases to a game.
Yep. Three advantages. Yep. Everybody wants to forget the third one. But
Yep.
All right. So let's get into everybody's favorite moment, the score predictions. What do you got, man?
All right. So for some reason, the first number that popped into my head, I'm going to go ahead and reveal it now. Obviously, I'm going to pick my Ravens to win. Mm-hmm. I think last year when I came on the show, I actually picked the Colts to win.
Yes, you did.
I was not feeling confident in my team. Obviously, now that has changed. I do feel a little more confident in my team. I'm going to say Ravens win 27-21. That's my final score prediction right there.
Okay. All right. That's respectable there. Yeah, I feel I don't know if it's just me being a homer, but I try not to be, especially for these. But with the team starting to get a little bit more healthy, I feel that, even without Quentin Nelson and maybe one or two other guys, I feel that with potentially you guys missing some key pieces along your offense and your defense, I feel that we can still go toe-to-toe with what you guys all can do. I think it really just all depends on what Lamar Jackson is able to do with his legs and if that arm is as truly special as it's looked so far. I'm going to pick the Colts because I just want to do that for myself one more time here, even though I do believe that the Ravens have a very good chance of winning this game. I think it will be 28-24 Colts. I think both teams are going to score pretty adequately. I just think that the Colts will maybe be able to dominate the time of possession a little more. I see a lot more chances for opportunity against this Ravens team who has committed some mistakes. And while this Ravens defense has been good at forcing turnovers, the Colts have not turned the ball over very often this year. I mean, that was the one concern that everybody had with Carson Wentz coming in was, are we going to get the turnover-prone quarterback that he was in 2020? Well, so far, he hasn't been that. He's been anything but that. He's been very –
Yep. Absolutely, Derek. Thanks for having me, man. And, of course, shout out to the Colts fans. You know, it's all love. I got no beef with you guys. I got beef with the Titans. I hate the Titans fans.
We hate them too, man. So I guess we can both agree on that.
There you go.
They are the most hostile and the most toxic fans. I feel like even to a certain point, like, I mean, sorry to go off tangent, but it's like, even like some other teams, you know, like Brown fans, Pittsburgh fans, you know, they can all be kind of like, they can all just be kind of stupid at times. But like the Titans fans, when they win, they are so
it's the worst.
Toxic.
It's the worst.
I mean, they have to rip into you with everything they have.
Yes. It's the worst. The worst fan base I've ever dealt with, no doubt, for sure.
Actually was kind of glad that they got instant karma from you guys last year when you stomped on their logo. That was instant karma. I mean, that's how it is, man. Mess with one team's logo. We saw last year, a lot last year, you mess with a team's logo, it comes back to bite you in the ass. Juju knows it. The Titans know it. So, you know, the AFC North certainly has its fair share of experiences with that last year. But
a lot of pride, too. A lot of pride.
Absolutely. And Colts fans, make sure you all check out his channel at Ravens Fan Reacts. I mean, it's great stuff. Make sure to check that out when you guys can. Let us know what you guys think of this game coming up on Monday Night Football, first primetime game for the Colts this year. I can't wait to be streaming that with you guys. Let us know your thoughts. Thank you so much. And as always, go Colts.
Later.